Nagano Winter Olympics 98 was released for both the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 in Japan in late 1997 and then in early 98 in other regions. And the game was developed and published by Konami and would focus on various winter events from skating, skiing, bobsleigh, slalom events, halfpipe, even snowboarding, among a few others. The game is also part of the Track and Field Hypersport series. If you're familiar with International Track and Field, that was also released by Konami on the PlayStation. This is also part of the same lineage of those type of games and has a very similar graphical and visual style, and even gameplay mechanics wise is quite similar. So with the multitude of modes, the game also gives you the ability to play with your friends, up to 4 players, using the PlayStation multi-tap accessory with 4 controllers, so it can allow you to have a lot of fun in group competitions. And the goal essentially is to win each event to obtain the gold medal, or to achieve like silver or bronze as well, depending on which place you end up in. So there are a variety of different countries that you can play as in order to compete. Now I will say from the get-go, unlike International Track and Field, which I consider to be one of the best multiplayer games ever, this game is very different, even though it may look the same visually, but it's a very different affair with regards to its control features. Some of the game modes and events in this game are very difficult to play, even on an easy difficulty. You will struggle with this. I even found myself struggling with the skiing events, that you would get so far and you'd always crash or miss a gate and you're instantly disqualified as soon as you make a mistake. And in other events, the competition is so high that it's just very difficult to win. Even with the snowboarding events themselves, because the snowboarding speed or pace is so slow that it's very hard to really gain any sense of speed in order to gain momentum so that you can even have a chance of winning a race. So you'll always end up at least 20 or 30 seconds behind. And a lot of those gripes contributed in the game's unfavourable reviews at the time, with the game receiving pretty much average reviews across the board on both platforms, and mainly because of some of those issues with regards to the lack of balance with regards to the game modes being very difficult for many people just to pick up and play, compared to International Track and Field, which had more of a user-friendly approach to it. This game definitely is different. It's a lot harder to pick up and play. It just feels unbalanced and uneven in many cases, but with reviewers often stating that the game is at the time worth renting out for a weekend rather than actually purchasing it, which I suppose does correlate to the style of the game, because it will appeal to some in short doses but it won't appeal to others in many ways. But I do remember way back in the days when this game was out, it was heavily publicised in magazines and on storefronts. Like literally every game shop you went into, there was posters and just advertisement banners for this game pretty much everywhere. So they were really marketing this and promoting it like crazy back then in order to get copies sold. Like, it's not a bad game. Like, there's definitely enough value in here in terms of the game modes, like with bobsleighing, and it is a lot of fun because there's a lot of elements in this game that you wouldn't see in other sports games, and that does present a unique appeal to it. It's just the lack of unbalance with the gameplay and the mechanics, and even just the overall sense of speed on some of the game modes will definitely leave a bitter taste with many players, and just the lack of functionality with regards to how each game plays, because there's some of the modes where you have to do jumps or do stunts, but the game does not give you any idea or interaction as to what buttons to press. Instead, you're left with all of these button combinations on the screen. In some cases we have to press a combination of buttons, but it doesn't actually do anything, when all you have to do is just race down a ramp, hit a jump and try and land. But even if you do land properly, you still end up crashing and falling on your backside. So it's hard to really know what to do with the game, because the game doesn't explain very well, or actually doesn't really explain at all on some of the events as to what it is that you're supposed to actually do, and that can completely throw you off, as it did with me, because I'm left here in many cases just scratching my head and like, what have I just witnessed? What the hell is going on? So that will drive people crazy, and I'm sure it did back then. See, the one thing with these games is, yes, I know that these games are never going to be easy to pick up and play, especially more these intricate games. There's always something about them that just, they always overcomplicate certain things, but you need to have elements in place to explain what it is that you need to do, or even like a video tutorial or something. But in this game there's nothing. You're literally just thrown into the event, and then it's literally up to you to figure it out. And it's not a case of, even like with Track and Field, if you compare it to that game, where most of the events you literally just bash the buttons like square or circle and you can run and you can gain speed and momentum, and it's very simplistic in how it approaches itself. But this game tries to overcomplicate things, and even when you try to do the same thing, you don't get the same result. So for many many, I can understand what the appeal was, that people would have thought going into this that it would have been very like international track and field, but let's just put it this way, it's not. It's a very different animal altogether. In many cases, in some degree, it works to a certain point, but in other events it doesn't seem to really work at all, from my own experience. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's noticed that. Like, I'm sure there's people out there that have figured out what to do, but it's just not straightforward. That was the major issue that I found playing it, which is a pity, because there's definitely a lot of replay value in the game, and there's a lot here in terms of modes and little quips that can keep you playing, and it has enough multiplayer aspects that you can have good fun with your mates if you know what you're doing. But that's the problem. If you don't know what you're doing, you won't achieve any results, and you'll end up failing all the time, which will lead you just to get annoyed and just turn the game off. Like, I don't like to hate on games, but considering how much this was publicised, you would have expected it to be a bit more user friendly in some regards, with regards to some of the game modes, and especially considering that this came from a long lineage of very popular sports games. Like, when we look at international track and field, which for me, like I said, I consider that to be one of my favourite multiplayer games of all time, and it's a game that I never ever considered to be good, but when I got into it, it was bloody fantastic. I had so many laughs with that game, but unfortunately lightning doesn't strike in the same place twice, so yeah, unfortunately we're never going to get that with this game, even though you'd nearly expect it, considering it was developed by the same team. But no, it's a very different approach to it, and yes, there's some enjoyable factors to it, but there's definitely less enjoyable factors, if I'll be honest. And it's an overall difficult game. It will take a lot of tries, a lot of patience, and for a lot of people, they will end up going somewhere else before long. It's a pity, because the game promised so much but failed in so many ways. When you think of the diverse aspect of what is available, like, there is a lot here, but it's just, I think it could have been better, and you can clearly see that in the reviews. The reviews definitely go to town on it in many respects, as that's where they found the majority of their gripes with the mixed bag elements, with the unbalance in the gameplay and features, and just not really knowing what you're supposed to do, and again, no tutorials or no outlook to show you what to do. You're pretty much just left to your own devices to figure it out, and yeah, there's a lot that can be said about that, or not said really as such, but it is what it is. Not every game was perfect, and a lot of these games back then didn't really have those elements in place. They didn't hold your hand in how they presented themselves. It was pretty much up to you. You were just thrown in at the deep end, and you were left to figure it out, and a lot of it was down to trial and error, and this game is proof of that. But I will admit, there's better games out there, and there's better games even from the same developer, which is a pity, considering like how promoted this game was. It just could have been a little bit better, I think. But I don't like to hate on games. There is some traits about it that I do like, but there's other traits of it that I admit could have been better. But I would love to know your thoughts of Nagano Winter Olympics 98, and what do you think of the game overall? Did you enjoy it, or did you find it equally as frustrating with some of the elements, not really sure what to do, like many others have? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other types of games like this that were also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.